You still love God. That's the part that makes this so hard to explain. Because if you had walked away from faith entirely, this would be simpler. You could call it doubt. You could call it deconstruction. You could put a name on it that other people recognize. But that's not what's happening. You love God, maybe more than you ever have. Your faith is real. Your prayer life is real. The moments alone with God, those are still the truest moments of your week. But when Sunday comes, something in you closes. Not dramatically, not with anger exactly, just a quiet, persistent resistance that you can't fully explain and can't fully push through. You try to push through it. You've shown up anyway, sat in a row, sang the songs, listened to the sermon, and walked out feeling further from God than when you walked in. And that's the part you can't say out loud, because saying it sounds like you're attacking the church, and you're not. You're just being honest about what happens to you inside it. Something closes, and the guilt of that, the guilt of loving God and dreading the place you're supposed to meet Him, is one of the loneliest things you've ever carried. Because the people who would understand are the people you stopped seeing on Sundays. So you carry it quietly. The love for God that's still completely real. And the resistance you can't make go away. Here's what nobody prepares you for. The moment the church starts costing you more than it gives. Not because you expected it to be perfect. You knew it wasn't perfect. You made peace with that a long time ago. But there's a difference between imperfect and depleting. And at some point, you can't always name exactly when the experience shifted. The Sunday morning stopped being the place you were filled and started being the place you had to manage yourself just to get through. Managing the politics you accidentally stepped into. Managing the theology you no longer agree with but don't feel safe questioning. Managing the version of yourself you have to perform to belong. And you kept managing for longer than you should have because leaving felt like failure. Because you'd built your community there and didn't know who you were outside of it. And then one Sunday, you woke up and the management was too expensive, and you stayed home, and God was there, in the quiet of your kitchen, in the stillness of a morning without the production, closer than he'd felt in the building for months. And that confused you more than the resistance ever did. Because if God was here, if He met you here, what did that mean about the place you've been driving to every week trying to find Him? Here's something worth sitting with. The building was never where God lived. That's not a controversial theological statement. It's the thing God has been saying since Solomon dedicated the temple, and God responded by asking, "Will you really contain me here? Heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool." The gathering of believers, the shared worship, the community, those things are real and good. But the building was never the source. And sometimes what feels like distance from church is actually the beginning of something more honest. A faith that stops being located in a service and starts being located in a life. A relationship with God that doesn't require the right music, the right lighting, the right preacher to be real. And the guilt you've been carrying, the guilt of not wanting to go, of finding God more easily outside the building than inside it. That guilt assumes that the building is where you're supposed to be. But the early church met in homes, and in the desert, and on the road, and in prison. And the presence of God was in all of those places. Not despite the absence of the building, sometimes because of it. What if the resistance isn't a spiritual problem? What if it's spiritual information? Because your soul is not random. When something consistently costs you more than it gives, when a place that should be replenishing is depleting instead, that's not ingratitude. That's discernment. And discernment about institutions is one of the hardest things to trust. Because institutions have authority. And authority tells you the problem is you. That you need to pray more, commit more, serve more, give more of yourself to the thing that's draining you. And maybe sometimes that's true, but not always. Sometimes the resistance is the truest thing in the room. Sometimes the closing you feel when you walk through those doors is your soul protecting something that matters. Not the faith. The faith is still there, still real, still growing. But the version of yourself that can only exist in honesty. That can't keep nodding at things that don't sit right just to stay in the room. What feels like a problem to solve might actually be an invitation. Not away from God, into a more honest version of following Him. One that trusts the faith you have when you're alone with Him as much as the faith you perform when everyone could see. Think about a relationship that started in one place and grew into something that doesn't fit there anymore. Two people who fell in love in college. Everything about that season was formative. The coffee shop where they always met. The campus where they walked. The friends who were there for every early conversation. And then they graduated, and life expanded, and the relationship grew into something those spaces were never designed to hold. And going back to the coffee shop now, sitting in the same chairs, doesn't feel like home anymore. Not because the love is gone, because the love outgrew the space. And trying to have the relationship only in the original location would be a way of keeping it smaller than it became. Some of you are in a faith that has outgrown the space where it started. Not in a way that dishonors the space, but in a way that means the space can no longer hold everything you've become. The discomfort you feel on Sunday mornings might not be a sign that something is wrong. It might be a sign that your faith grew. And the question isn't how to fit yourself back into the container. The question is what it looks like to follow God in the space your faith actually occupies now. The woman at the well asked Jesus a question that had divided her community for generations. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain. You Jews say Jerusalem is the place. Where's the right place? It was a genuine question from someone who had been told that location determined access, that the right mountain, the right temple, the right institutional structure was what made worship real. And Jesus said something that changed everything. A time is coming and has now come when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. Not on this mountain or in Jerusalem, in spirit and in truth. The location was never the point. The orientation was. And the woman who asked the question, the one who had been living outside the boundaries of what her community considered acceptable, she was the one Jesus chose to have this conversation with. Not the religious leaders in the temple, not the faithful who showed up every week. The one on the outside, the one who had every reason to believe that her complicated relationship with the institution meant a complicated relationship with God. And Jesus told her, the institution was never the source. The source is available to you right now. Here, in this conversation, in spirit and in truth. That's still true. For you, right now, outside the building, if that's where you are. So let's name what's actually true. You're not someone who is failing at faith because church is hard right now. You're someone whose relationship with God is real enough to survive honesty about the institution. And that's not a small thing. A faith that requires the building to stay intact is a fragile faith. A faith that holds outside the building, that finds God in the kitchen on Sunday morning, that prays in the car, that reads scripture without the production. That faith is resilient in a way that building-dependent faith never gets to be. You didn't lose your faith when the church started feeling wrong. You found out how much of it was actually yours. And the part that's actually yours is the part that's still here. Still talking to God. Still caring. Still bothered by the distance between what the church says and what you've watched it do. That bothered feeling isn't cynicism. It's love with standards. And love with standards is closer to what God has always asked for than comfortable compliance ever was. You're allowed to love God and need space from the institution. Those two things can be true at the same time. And the guilt you've been carrying, the guilt of not being able to make yourself go, of finding God more easily outside than inside, that guilt is not from Him. He has never once required the building. He required honesty. He required love. He required the kind of worship that comes from spirit and truth, not from showing up in the right row at the right time. And that, the honest, private, real version of your faith, that has been enough all along. Before you go, type these words in the comments. My faith is real outside these walls. Not as a rejection of the church, as a declaration that what you have with God is not dependent on the institution to be true. Because it isn't. It never was. And you're allowed to know that.